The top economist at Australia's biggest bank, ANZ, believes China is facing its biggest economic challenges ever. Richard Yetsinga says the biggest risks to global growth are the health of the Chinese economy and a shift in attitudes to globalisation as more countries put up barriers. He's visiting New Zealand, and earlier today, business reporter Nona Peltier sat down with him in the studio and asked him how he thinks China is coping with the changes we're currently seeing around the world.
I think China's challenges are larger than they've ever been. I have tremendous respect for the Chinese policy process, the way they've found creative solutions to difficult problems. There are a range of difficult problems facing them in the next couple of years. I'm not worried about growth this year or next year. So China has an objective to be what they call a moderately prosperous society. By 2020, they need growth of about 6% this year and next year to achieve that. I think they'll do that. The question is what happens after that. Exports has been a big driver of growth, and of course there's some tension around that. Internal migration has been a big driver of Chinese growth, and the working age population in China is now shrinking, so that is becoming more difficult. And obviously allocating credit to build infrastructure and investment has been a big driver of growth. The debt to GDP ratio in China is 250%. So all of the main drivers of growth for China the last couple of decades, you can see just finding headway more difficult. I think over the next decade, China's growth rate is going to slow quite meaningfully.
Do you think the Chinese government would use fiscal policy to stimulate the economy to make sure that it continues to grow?
They're already doing a bit of that. So on informal estimates suggest the budget deficit is over 4% of GDP now in China. And when you think the economy is growing at 6% in real terms, pretty meaningfully sized budget deficit to keep it going at 6%. It suggests the really sustainable rate of growth in China is actually below 6%, and that's where I think we'll end up over the next couple of years. But I think most countries are using fiscal policy. Perhaps countries will go through periods of a bit of fiscal retrenchment. But if I look at Australia, for instance, I think we've hit peak budget. You know, the parties have spent 5 years arguing over who can repair the budget the best. Now the budget's back in surplus. Any upside budgetary surprises are going to be spent regardless of who's in office.
How is that going to play into the New Zealand economy, do you think?
So New Zealand's in a slightly different cycle because the political transition occurred about 2 years ago, but also there's been a change in the tone around fiscal policy, an effort to use more fiscal resources to address some of the issues which are really, I guess, eating away at the electorate, equality of outcomes, the environment, standards of education, and particularly in New Zealand at the moment, issues around the structure of the tax system.
And that was Richard Yetsinga speaking to Nona Peltier. He is a top economist at ANZ in Australia.